Hi everybody, welcome to this week's Single Sales Principle webinar. Today the subject is all about getting into box 9. Before we talk about exactly what box 9 is, let's just remind ourselves why we're trying to get into box 9. We've all heard the phrase, turnover is vanity, profit is sanity. You may be one of those organizations that sell an awful lot of volume with a tiny margin, and that's absolutely fine, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. But really, this is for those companies that want to sell a premium product with a premium price that absolutely makes some money for your organization and for you as a salesperson. So let's just remind ourselves as to what we mean by box 9. There are really two axes that we talk about. We talk about the price axis, which goes from low, medium to high. And then we talk about, if you like, the value axis, which is really talking about the solution match. What is your credible solution? And is this aligned with the customer's compelling needs? When you then put those two axes together, you then get the perceived value line. So the whole idea of this is that it doesn't really matter how much you charge for your product or services, as long as it meets the value line. And it will meet the value line if the customer perceives that the credible solution is high enough and that credible solution is something that they want. Is it something that they need? If so, you hit the value line. So where do we get the different boxes? Well, quite simply, we start to then map out 9 boxes onto this grid. Boxes 1, 5 and 9 are where the price being charged is equal to the value that we believe as a customer we are getting out of it. So for example, box 1, that's where we're charging a low price, but we kind of get exactly what it says on the tin, and we're happy. We're happy with what we get in terms of the value. It's not a lot of money, but we get a pretty good return. Box 5 is where it's a medium price. It may be something that we are paying, not top dollar for, but it's certainly not cheap as chips. And the kind of value that we get, we think it's fair for that sort of money. And lastly, box 9 is where paying a lot of money, premium price for this product, but the value that we are getting back is very much top spec, and that's what we really want, either because of a rational need that we have or an emotional need that we have. So very much box 1, 5 and 9 are where we want to be from a adding value, giving value perspective. And depending on your price strategy will depend which one of those we are aiming for. So what about the other boxes? Well, boxes 2, 3 and 6 are the places where you definitely don't want to be. Why? Well, because this is where you are charging more money than the perceived value that customers are getting. And often when we work with customers, they often say to us, as salespeople are feeling like we're in box 6. We are selling a premium brand. This is a product that needs to be sold. However, there are cheaper competitors out there in the marketplace, and we kind of feel like we're being beaten up over price. So areas 2 or boxes 2, 3 and 6, they're dangerous places to live in. Because of course, if that continues and customers continue to think that we're adding less value than the price that we're charging, then that's a recipe for business disaster. And lastly, what are the other 3 boxes? Well, this is where you as an organization are absolutely going over and above the money that you're charging. So if we think about boxes 4, 7 and 8, these are where we're not charging absolute top dollar, but in some cases we really are raising the bar in terms of the product, delivery, service, etc. that we're giving. So our perception of value is a lot higher than what we are actually charging them for. Now that may sound like a great place to be, and of course from a competitor differentiation perspective, you're in a pretty strong position. The problem is, of course, if you're continually charging a small price for something that you're adding a huge amount of value for, it sounds like your margins are getting squeezed and squeezed. And can you continue to add that sort of level of service? So we're going to talk about some of the things that we need to do. Surely you need to be charging what you're worth, not what you think somebody will pay. So let's take a look at that. So some of the strategies that are involved. The first one is, let's talk about the sort of companies that charge a low price, but they don't give a huge amount of value for that. These are what we would call the pile them high, sell them cheap type organizations. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great strategy. For companies like Ryanair, it served them extremely well. You'll remember when Ryanair and EasyJet and these sort of people first came onto the scene. It was hurrah, because do you know what? I just want to get from A to B. I don't care about the plastic meal that I'm going to get on the flight, okay? I don't care about the kind of, booking in advance and all this sort of thing. I just want to get there, I want to get into a seat, I want to get off, because I'm only on there for 1 hour. It sounded like a great proposition. You didn't get a huge amount of value back, but they were as cheap as chips, a £9 flight. Now the challenge, of course, for Ryanair is that as time has gone on, we really didn't get those £9 flights, because by the time I checked out, the basket had seemed to grow arms and legs. It wasn't quite the price that they said it was going to be by the time I'd added on extra bags, or I paid for a seat in advance and all of these sort of things. So one of the challenges that Ryanair had is that suddenly we weren't paying cheap as chips. We were starting to get kind of into that mid-range, and people like me started to think, well, do you know what? I may as well go to BA, because at least I get treated with respect at BA, which is not quite how I felt I got treated at Ryanair. So the challenge with the pile and high, sell them cheap, is that you've got to make sure that you stay cheap. The minute that you start to raise that price, then I'm going to jump ship, because actually you're not treating me as in terms of value the way I expect to be treated. Okay, so let's talk about other organizations that are in that space right now. So Audi, for example, they'd very much sort of giving out that sort of PR of being low cost. And absolutely, if you walk into their stores, and a lot of their products are extremely cheap. But what's interesting is they're getting an awful lot of the margin, because on certain categories, they're actually raising the bar. Basically, my wife goes into Audi for specific items. A, because she often can't get them elsewhere. But secondly, they're of really, really good quality. So for those guys, they're very much elevating themselves. Even though they're charging a low price, they're getting into box 4 and in some cases box 7, which is really, really smart. Now, they may have other products, I guess, out there, which are kind of in the box 1. But their box 4 and box 7s are really giving them excellent PR. People are talking about the great value that we get from Audi. Okay, so let's talk about the box 1, the box 4 and the box 7. As a salesperson, do we need to sell? Well, I'm going to argue no. You don't actually need a sales team to be able to sell in box 1, 4 and 7. You basically need a good marketing team, because if it's all about the price, then simply tell enough people about it and they'll buy. I could probably get my 8-year-old son to sit in his bedroom with a long email list, and if I sent out that offer, which is an excellent offer with the cheapest in the marketplace, he would eventually get an order. Now, is he a highly trained salesperson? He's 8, for goodness sake. He probably isn't. Actually, he does tend to persuade me and an awful lot of things. The point here, we don't need a sales team to be able to sell at boxes 1, 4 and 7. What do we need a sales team for? Well, we need a sales team when we're selling premium products. So this is where the quest for box 9 comes in. If we have a premium product with a premium price, you need to sell added value. And on single sales principle, we're constantly talking about how we get from a commodity type sale into value add. So if you are in box 7, congratulations. But as a business, the strategy surely should be, how do we continue to give exceptional value, but charge what we believe we are worth? Okay. Marks and Spencer's. This is a really interesting company to study because they have two very separate sides to their business. If we think about Marks and Spencer's simply food, in my opinion, they are a really, really good box 9 organization. They are expanding all over the place. They're incredibly successful. They charge a premium price, but people clearly believe they're getting value for money. Why are they getting value for money? Well, they keep coming back and they keep expanding. And this side of the business is doing extremely well. In contrast, however, let's talk about Marks and Spencer's clothes. They are not the cheapest in the market space. Okay, they're not the most expensive, but they're not the cheapest. They're kind of in that mid-range. But somewhere along the line, they have lost their value. People don't perceive them to have the same value that they were. So when you're kind of in this kind of box 6, box sort of 2, 3 sort of range, you've got two options. One is that you can start to go down towards the left side, if you like, of that grid. You can go west, okay, i.e. drop your prices. Now, if Marks and Spencer's get into a price war with Primark, how do you think that is going to end? I'm suggesting not very well for Marks and Spencer's. Why? Because I'm guessing that they're not as lean as Primark are. Primark have made a business about manufacturing cheap items and being able to sell them cheap, stack them high. And I'm not sure Marks and Spencer's quite have the infrastructure to be able to make that happen. So what's the other alternative? Well, we can go north. We can add value. But can they add value to the extent, if you like, of Selfridges? They're not a Selfridges, are they? So they're kind of stuck at the moment in this middle ground, this middle England. And the problem is, I think a lot of ladies, if you think about ladies' clothes, yes, I can go and shop in Marks and Spencer's, but I'm going to look like my gran. So there's a real challenge here for Marks and Spencer's to understand exactly where their positioning is. Talking about positioning, British Home Stores, of course, in the last couple of weeks, we now know that British Home Stores has gone bankrupt. Now, what's the problem here? Well, they didn't know where they were positioned. What was the space that BHS were in? If we look at their furniture, for example, there are a number of places that I can buy furniture. I can buy lampshades, etc. from Argos. Now, that's going to be box 1. It will be cheap as chips, but I get what I get, okay? Or I can go to John Lewis. If I go to John Lewis, I get that real reassurance that whatever goes wrong, I can take it back. No quibbles, okay? Or there are specialists out there, furniture stores like Baker and Stonehouse. Where were BHS? They were being all things to all people. Woolworths, that great British institution, went the same way. Were they a music shop? Were they a sweet shop? Were they a newsagent? They didn't know. We didn't know. Consequently, we didn't buy from them anymore and they went bust. So very much what we need to be doing, if we're in this box 6 situation, we need to think about either going west and dropping our price. We don't really want to do that. So the real alternative for you as a salesperson is to increase the value. Now, how do you increase value? The first thing we often do is to try to sell our credible solution. So what are the features and what are the advantages of what we have to offer? Why are we so much different to our competitors? What are our unique selling points? What are the S's that we have to offer? What are our awards? What are our accreditations, our associations? Who are the clients that we work for? What's the reassurance that we can give you that we're an absolutely brilliant customer? And to all of these things, the customer can say, 2 words. So what? If it doesn't meet my needs, then it isn't a benefit. So it's not just about offering an credible solution. What you've got to do is understand exactly what the customer wants. If you don't understand what the customer wants, you don't understand exactly where they're positioned in the marketplace and how you can meet that, then why would they pay a premium price? If they want cheap because it does exactly what it says on the tin, well then that's what they're going to buy. So your job is not only to identify the credible solution, it's to identify their emotional and their rational needs and ensure that you meet those emotional and rational needs. It was Steve Jobs, and I love this quote. Obviously, I've said this many times. It's really hard to design products by focus groups. A lot of times, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And that's the challenge. Maybe there are known needs that the customer has, but maybe there are unknown needs. Maybe one of the things that you've got to do is to show them the future, show them what they don't know. It was Henry Ford who said that if he'd have asked what people wanted, they'd have come up with, I want a faster horse. They didn't want a faster horse. A motor car was exactly what they wanted, but they didn't know that. So one of the ways of getting into box 9 is to create that marketplace, create that need, articulate that need, challenge the customer, tell them what they should know. And that's how we get into box 9. Apple, it's good that we just said the Steve Jobs quote, because Apple are probably the masters of this. We can all buy a cheaper PC, a cheaper phone, a cheaper tablet, but we don't, or I certainly don't, because Apple gives me so much more. It gives me style. It gives me a bit of kudos. It's a great looking product, okay? Whatever it gives me, it's worth paying the extra money for. So that's what you've got to try and do in your business. You've got to raise your credible solution, understand your positioning, understand how you differentiate yourself, understand the value that you give. But that's only half the battle. Create the need with the customer, the rational and the emotional, the articulated and the unarticulated needs. You need to challenge your customer. You need to explain exactly why they need to buy from you. And that way you can get into box 9. So good luck with selling premium products at premium prices. Sell what you're worth, and we look forward to speaking to you next time.